before I forget, I want to make sure I ask, how do you approach researching the lives of people who really existed? I know when I do my research, I'm more sort of researching the time period, and I might be drawing inspiration from some people, but I don't have necessarily the somebody's life that can, I imagine, both be a great thing. It provides some structure for a narrative, but also can be challenging in the same way. So how do you approach that research aspect of your writing?
Yes, thank you for pointing that out, because there is that as an advantage, that there is some potential structure in terms of novel. But in my case, in terms of writing about some of these women, their early lives in particular don't exist as a matter of public record for me to go and retrieve. And those are factors that are due to racism, to be honest. So then it does require me to do certain things like to draw upon potentially maybe other people's lives who might have lived at a similar time period. One of the serendipitous happenstances with Anne Lowe, for instance, was that she was born around the same time and 2 counties over in Alabama from where my paternal great-grandmother was born. So I already knew what her early years looked like from that particular standpoint, from what I had been hearing about while I was growing up. And then another happy coincidence was she was also born very close to where famous Zora Neale Hurston was born, who was also somebody that I had studied in my dissertation. So again, because of that background, I also knew what her early years looked like. So when you don't have access to typical methods of primary and secondary research, and that I can draw upon that kind of thing in terms of particularly that her early years, as tricky as they were, to think about how to write about that time period. But Anne Lowe, as a figure, particularly during her Florida years, was very well documented, much more documented than a woman of her time period, much more than a Black woman of her time period would have been documented, given the, and this probably sounds familiar, the whole aspect about a woman not being in the public record or known about unless it was her birth, her marriage, and her death. Her design talents propelled her into newspapers and other kinds of places where I could draw upon those resources and talk about the ways in which people saw her. A scholar, a textile scholar who had been working on her biography prior to her passing, had written a thesis. And so her thesis also provided a way for me to look at her life and certain life events. She had done the work of interviewing certain people in Anne Lowe's life. That also helped. But what also helped, primarily because I had written this during the pandemic, was that there were many photographs of Anne Lowe's dresses, not just, how we might like to look at dresses from the front, but the inside of the dresses. That also gave me some insight to how she would approach creation of many of her designs as well, that I found helpful. Like I said, particularly because I couldn't go anywhere. So that all worked to help me think about writing the book from her standpoint and her thinking about her art.
Is that something, is dressmaking something that you're also very much interested yourself? Is that to write a whole novel on that? I would think you would have to be, wouldn't you?
You would think you would.
Or else you learned a lot.
What? There is a baby quilt in the corner of my closet, pink and blue triangles, that I tried to put together and will never happen to be put together. No, another fortunate thing was that my mother was a seamstress. So I also was able to understand what it was to put something together from having, I don't like to say be forced to witness it, but that there was a purpose in being her little being her little companion while she was having sewing sessions, right?
Well, it's that sense of like nothing is wasted. Even you watching watching
exactly
her stitch. You're like, I can use that in a novel.
Right. Being forced to be in there with her while she was putting stuff together, watching Star Trek in the Wild Wild West, while she's making a dress for somebody or making uniforms for our family choir, whatever it was. That's what it was. Nothing is wasted. So yeah. There you go.
I like that. It's proof that research comes out of everywhere.
It does. It really does. And you really have to draw upon it, like I said, for, I don't like to call them holes. There's just spaces of silence in terms of that are left for the novelist to come in and fill, to create that life, to recreate that life. So,
Thanks for watching this clip from the History Quill podcast, all about writing and publishing historical fiction. If you want to find out more about the topics discussed, check the description for a link to the full episode and the episode page on our website, where you can access a range of relevant resources. You can also join our email list to receive new podcast episodes and more content for historical fiction writers. And of course, don't forget to like, subscribe, and switch on notifications.